Friends, welcome back to another episode of the Film Alchemist podcast, the show where we look at movies we love, break them apart, to find out what gives them their dream magic. I'm your host, Josh Griffey, dressed as just a sad hipster Freddy Krueger. My children, joined as always by my questioning everything in his life, and with the serial killer inside and co-host, Alex Dandino.
More like questioning co-hosting this podcast with a guy who's willing to dress up.
Are you kidding me? If you can see this on YouTube and the Skype, is this not sexy?
Oh.
Look at those. Sexy. Yeah, for those of you that aren't looking, I just look like a really svelte, healthily bearded Freddy Krueger pre-burns.
Yes. Nothing better than horizontal stripes on the bod, that's for sure.
All right, that's it. I can't wear the hat. It doesn't fit. Here we go. Guys, you know what's up. Sojourn through the horrors of A Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th this month. We start today back on Elm Street. This is Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge.
Woo!
Alex, this is often, in my opinion, unfairly decided as the worst Nightmare on Elm Street movie. I
totally
secretly have always really liked, well, not secretly, I always say it out loud, I say it loud, I say it proud. What is your take on this Freddy's Revenge? Do you hate this movie? Where do you come in? What about it works for you if you like it?
I love this movie, man. I think it's insane.
Right?
Like, it's so much fun, and it is unfairly maligned. Like, it's... First off, what I love is that it's literally the next logical step in the Freddy Krueger oeuvre. Like, Freddy Krueger realizes that he can't... Like, what I love is, like, Freddy Krueger is changing his MO. Like, and this is something that I think is really important, is, like, going into the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, the Friday the 13th movies, and ostensibly also the Halloween movies, like, Freddy Krueger's the only one who changes his MO pretty much every time. Like, the other two are just sort of mindlessly walking around stabbing people because they don't have to. Like, what they're doing works. Freddy's the only one who has to, like, change his shit up because people are figuring out his... how he runs his show. Like, I have such a good time. Not only that,
as it gets deeper, we have to keep questioning what Freddy even is.
Right. And this is the fun of, like, Freddy Krueger as a character, and this is the fun of him, like, interacting, because this is the movie where he, like, the first one he really is just like an overall boogeyman. This is the first one where he really starts, like, talking to characters and having, like, really pretty, like, I hate to put it this way, tender moments with these characters where he's, like, getting into their psyche. And I again, like,
is that what you kids call it these days?
It's so much fun. Like, I don't understand people's hatred for this. Like, there are like visual gags in this movie that I think last in my brain forever. Like, I adore it.
Yeah, but this is the thing, right? Is my friend Cloud, who you'll hear later, he did 4 of these movies with me. He was saying, this is the one that doesn't fit. It doesn't play like the rest of them. To me, that's a benefit, right? Because
that's perfect.
My value in sequels is give me enough of what I like, which they did in this, right? It's Freddy Krueger hunting. But add something new to the myth. Because this is what I told you, right? When we're going to do every Friday the 13th, and I've already done a bunch of them.
Right.
At a certain point, you can't just say, wow, another machete kill. Right? Like, you have to find
You have to find
So
the
when
thing.
they add a new wrinkle in the world, the mythology, how the supernatural works, I think this one's fascinating because, first off, it's like, why is there a desert in Illinois? Never mind.
Well, we'll get into that. There is some, like...
Right, but what is fascinating to me is, so Fred Krueger achieved his mission, seemingly, of getting revenge on the parents who killed him. This movie takes a sharp turn away from that version of Fred Krueger into, well, now I exist in this new entity.
Right.
I want to get back to what's fun. And this gets to something I've always thought about Freddy is the killing in the dream cannot be satisfying to a serial killer whose MO was physical torture and mutilation, right?
Right.
This is Freddy saying, fuck this dream shit. I want to get back into the real world. I think that's a fascinating thing to look at with this character.
Again, I think it's like the whole point, like, it's interesting. Like, yeah, I understand Cloud's point of it not fitting, sure. But I also agree with you. It's the benefit of the entire movie is that while it doesn't fit, like, that's the point of sequels. Like, People often miss the point. Like sequels to me, and I don't know if I've ever talked about this in the show. I probably have because we've talked about sequels before. But sequels to me are not to repeat the success of the first one. To me, sequels function as like, it's not about repeating success. Perhaps from like a monetary standpoint it is, sure. But from a writing and from a creating standpoint, I think sequels are not meant to repeat success. They're meant to progress the story. They're meant to tell, like if you have enough bones about you to do a sequel to a movie, especially like a movie like Nightmare on Elm Street, which totally has the legs for a sequel. Why would you not experiment with not just like the characters? Like, yes, we all know kids are going to get murdered in their dreams. Got it. Cool. Whatever. Why would you not experiment though with the main, like what you get out of the first Nightmare on Elm Street is Nancy is not the main character. Fucking Freddy is. That's the important thing to remember. Right. So why would you not experiment and give your character new life in another way? It's like, you're not going to do like you think about I think about the movie like Altered States. Altered States you'd never need a sequel to because you understand what's going to happen. Like there's nothing about Altered States that needs to be sequelized.
We've done altered it already.
We've altered the state. But Nightmare on Elm Street, everyone has different kinds of nightmares. Everybody's a different person. Freddy is also Freddy is, while he might be a vengeful ghost murderer, he also is a living, breathing character. He's been a human before. He wants to feel that again. Right. You're right. So
what I would say is that Nightmare 1, I do kind of see Nancy as our lead more than Freddy, right? This one feels like a two-hander, right? Yeah. This is the classic horror motif of fear of self.
Right.
Because this one has two really interesting divergences to me is I don't think we actually see anyone die in a dream in this movie.
No, everyone dies in real life, I think.
Right. So that's very different. Even though guided by Freddy's hand, they die in the real world. Secondly, what I think is funny is that this movie doesn't get into the guy who is trying to stay awake. Like most Freddy movies, it's like you see these strung out kids like Nancy in part 1, like, I can't sleep, that's where he is. Jesse constantly goes to bed every night, and then they throw in one scene about 45 minutes in where he's like, here's some sleeping pills.
He's like chowing down on No-Dos. Yeah. There's that one scene.
Yeah, that's like one scene. And then they go right back to, well, I guess he's going to fall asleep again. He even goes to that guy's house, right? He's like, hey, watch me while I sleep. So Jesse is the one teen from the series who does not seem to, while he's afraid of the dreams and what they might mean, he doesn't seem to be tremendously afraid of sleeping and allowing the dreams to access him.
Right. I mean, I think
which is a fun extra thing to play with.
Right. I mean, this is like the thing I like the most about this movie is the title is so true. It's Freddy's Revenge. Well, what would Freddy need revenge on? He's got his revenge. He killed all those kids on Elm Street. Well, Freddy's revenge was not to kill all the kids on Elm Street. Freddy's revenge is to get back into the real world and start some shit. Like, that's what it's all about. Like, this isn't about...
Well, the scene that really stuck with me, right, in that regard, this is the one time I can remember in these movies, and I've watched them so many times now, it's all kind of a blur. This is the first one where we see Freddy actually go after another child.
Yeah, totally. Oh, wow, you're right.
In Jesse's body, he creeps into that room of his little sister, and it's fucking horrifying.
Yeah.
Because they actually do Freddy cam, right? Which is start in the boiler room, walk up the stairs, and then hover over, and we hear or we hear Freddy's voice, right? Sweet little girl. And then we cut to Jesse standing over his sister with the blades.
Yeah.
So this is Freddy again. I know, because we'll have to get to the gay subtext, obviously. But this is one of those moments where you see Freddy, this is his mission, right? He'll do the rest of this to spread fear and get more power. He wants to come back so he can find that kid, right? That's what Freddy's all
Well, yeah, I mean, there's just... Again, it's about what sequels are supposed to do. Like sequels are supposed to progress the story forward. So why wouldn't this be Freddy's next like alternative? Like, oh, I didn't get all these kids I wanted in the dreams. So the next step I should have is like, again, Freddy learning he has other powers, which is to literally like transubstantiate himself into human form through another human. Like that to me is like. That to me is true horror. Like that's the great stuff, and that's the stuff that really scares me. Like I'm always someone who like I love like it's body horror. I like body horror movies because they scare the shit out of me, and this is no different. Like as entertaining and 80s as those effects are, like you have to really consider the fear you would have of literally like gloved blades, like blades shooting out of your fingers and you having no control over it. Like that's some true fucking terror right there.
And this is the other one too, where we see Freddy later in the movie have the knives without the glove. They're just growing out of his fingertips.
Right? That's pretty cool. Like,
this is how I look at. Yeah, what I would say about Nightmare 2 is this is the Nightmare werewolf movie, right? This movie plays as a werewolf movie.
Absolutely.
Which is and that's the thing I like is what if his dreams about Freddy are not, and obviously I know what everyone else says Freddy represents in this movie. I get it. But let's go down another path for a minute, right?
Yeah.
What if the Freddy in this movie are his actual inner thoughts, right? The movie kind of starts with this bullied white kid who nowadays we'd be like, oh shit, put him on active shooter watch, right?
I know, right?
That's how this kid starts the movie.
Right.
What if his inner thought is, you know what? Fuck that gym teacher. Fuck that guy who bullies me all the time. So there's this extra level of what if he just has heard the story of Freddy because he moved into the house and Freddy isn't real, right? He is actually having the mental breakdown. Because one of the things I love is when Nightmare movies, the actions parallel the real world enough to where people can't believe that this isn't just a crazy teenager.
Right. Well, I think that's the other thing, too, that I like about this movie is Jesse's antagonists in this movie get a comeuppance, which is interesting because that's not in theme necessarily with how these movies are supposed to go. So really the question starts boiling down to like, is Jesse manifesting Freddy Krueger simply because he's dreaming, or is he manifesting because Freddy knows that he can manipulate Jesse because Jesse is that Columbine kid, you know? Like, because
right. Well, this gets to the fun part of Freddy, which is instead of him creating the dreams, what if through Jesse, right. He is in his dreams and says, "Oh, this kid's already halfway there."
Well, that's exactly
so
what it is.
He's just subtly guiding Jesse to these acts that he may have committed anyways. Because the two main kills that I think of is Freddy Jesse committing. Because what the funny thing is, this actually has the highest Freddy body count except for Freddy versus Jason.
Right.
Which is obviously just an absurdity. But this one has 12 kills, right? The first one had 3, maybe 4.
Well, like...
So a lot of that, again, is at the barbecue. But
right.
The 2 kills that I hone in on are the 2 men, right?
Right.
Because obviously this movie is referred to it by the fans, and I don't think derogatorily, right, is the homo nightmare. Which is this movie talks a lot about Jesse and Mark Patton as... You know, there's this huge subtext of his journey as a young gay man, right? Freddy's kind of the closeted gayness he's trying to hide.
Which is pretty obvious. Like, I don't really think it's a subtext. It's
all there. The writer admitted that he wrote it in and it was supposed to be very subtextual. The director played ignorant. It's so funny if you watch that Never Sleep Again documentary. He's like, well, I didn't get it. That's not what I was doing. It's like, well, that is insane. Yeah. Eyes wide shut kind of stuff, right? Like, you did not see this.
Right.
But... the 2 kills he makes that are so strange are the gym teacher and the guy that he seemingly has kind of an infatuation with, right?
Right. Well, it starts as
his bully turned friend.
Yeah, his bully, like the bully turned friend who's supposed to like watch him sleep. You know, again, like it's just such a fascinating when you start looking at it from that. Yeah, like the very not subtextual homoeroticism standpoint. It's
right.
It's a movie about, I would say it's not even a movie about coming out. It's about like grappling with yourself. Like there's a lot of that, like there's a lot of this like weird self-inflicted wound, a lot of self-hatred in the story and the characters in general. Like, and I mean, you can even find that in like Clu Gulager and Hope Lang as his parents, you know, like they're very dismissive of him. They're really shitty with him. Like they like, again, like blaming him for the heat in the house. It's a whole thing, you know, like
that's part of the thing, right? Is he, because that's one of the things you will get online sometimes is why would they depict gayness as an evil murderer? And it's like, that's how he sees himself being gay. Like there was a time, I think we're more accepting now. There was a time when you would have been terrified to come out in this town.
Well, look, I mean,
so he does view it as this ugly part of himself.
I mean, imagine having, look, I grew up in a Springwood, Ohio, you know, like this like, and so did you. Like we grew up in these areas where it's like, yeah, telling people you're gay is a terrifying experience. Like In the Midwest, it's not like totally. It was like
I still live in the Midwest, and not everyone's on board.
right,
man.
exactly.
It's 2019.
It's a terrifying experience. So like the self-inflicted wound aspect of Jesse's journey is very textual, not subtextual at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I mean, there's all kinds of like there's all kinds.
There's
of,
obviously the dancing and cleaning the room, the constantly waking up in the midst of wet dreams.
Yeah,
he wakes up. He sweats more in a dream than anyone I've ever seen in a movie.
It's shocking.
It's a lot. This movie has a lot of temperature. Themes.
But there's another thing too that I think is really interesting, and I didn't. It's funny. I had never picked up on it before, but the opening of this movie when they're on the bus, you see Jesse, and he looks like a Columbine kid. Like he's a little dweeby. His hair's matted down, but then like he wakes up.
He's a little into Depeche Mode.
Yeah,
for sure.
But then he wakes up, and you see him, and his like hair's tufted in that very 80s way. He's wearing colorful clothes, like. His internal reflection of himself is very poor, very sad. So, like, it's interesting to see him go through daily life. It's very
fascinating.
That is like probably the most subtextual metaphor in the movie. The rest of it's pretty on point.
Right.
Yeah.
The fear and smallness of what you're afraid people view you as in high school.
Exactly. Like, there's a lot of that going on. But then, like, and then obviously the gym teacher is. Whipped bare ass and then murdered, which is pretty funny.
I mean, the gym teacher in this movie, like, what a journey this guy has. Well, because this is the thing. Because as Jesse begins to progress, right, he has a nightmare of seeing a lightning bolt in his kitchen.
Right.
Right? It hits the dish drying rack. His response to this is to walk with his shirt unbuttoned into the local gay bar, which people know as the local gay bar.
Right.
He walks in soaking wet with his shirt open. His teacher finds him. Immediately, his response is to take him to school and punish him by making him run laps still wearing his Judas Priest get up.
Right.
Right? Goes to his office, and in what is maybe the most fucked up scene in the movie that I wanted answers for, gets out the fucking jump ropes. You're like, what the fuck is his plan for this? Then we cut to Jesse in the shower in this kind of very sensual, vulnerable moment. The teacher gets dragged in as all the balls in his office begin exploding about, right? He's dragged in, tied to the showers, essentially murdered by whips to the ass.
Yeah.
And then Freddy emerges from the steam to slice him. I like that it's the steam, too.
Yeah.
Because, again, it's Jesse who's doing this.
Right.
But that scene reeks of a closeted young kid and an adult taking advantage of him and him lashing out.
Totally.
There's a lot more going on in that scene than I think, meets the eye as you're watching. Like, did they just whip his ass? Like a ghost whipped his ass?
I mean, there's a lot of like, again, like you could chalk that up to, oh, that's kind of a funny sight gag. But like at the same time, because he's a gym teacher and that happens in gym class. But I'm like,
right.
If you dig any deeper in that, it gets so dark. Like the darkness creeping in that
just
scene
imagine
alone
a
is pretty
gym
dark.
teacher, right? A gay gym teacher in this town. Bringing that kid back to the school, to punish him.
Right.
That's a lot to unpack right there.
That's a bad. That's a fucked up gym. Like, not only is that a fucked up gym teacher, there's just a fucked up person who, in all honesty, like, and look, I don't mean to be pro pedophilia, but in a way, Freddy Krueger kind of is the hero of this scene by preventing Coach Snyder.
That was the most anticipation I've ever had for a second part of a sentence. When you started, I don't mean to sound pro-pedophile. I was like, I have to know where this goes.
Right. Again,
by the way, I don't think you sound pro-pedophile.
I'm not a fan of Freddy Krueger's practices, but he kind of ends up being the hero of this scene by preventing Coach Snyder from fucking with Jesse any further. Like,
yeah, I don't know. He's kind of an evil Mary Poppins thing.
Yeah, it is a little evil. It is a little evil Mary Poppins.
What's really funny about that scene, though, you can see Freddy marching through the steam, and he kind of has that robotic thing.
Right, yeah.
That was the actor they cast to replace Robert Englund.
Oh, no shit, really?
So before part 2, Robert Englund's like, dude, I think this thing is going to be a big deal. Part 1 was obviously a huge hit. He wanted more money.
Right.
They're like, fuck him. We'll just put someone else in the outfit. They had no idea what they had on their hands.
Right.
So they hired essentially an extra to do it. Right. And they said his walk was just so stiff and robotic. They're like, we lost everything that made Freddy cool.
Right.
Because Robert Englund always talks about, his process. Like, well, I developed the the hand with the glove, that shoulder, I droop it, right? Like the weight of this murder weapon.
Right.
He has all these little things he's doing that you don't appreciate. Well, they started with him, and I think that's the only shot of him left in the movie. And they were just like, oh, man, this guy fucking blows. We got to get Robert back now. In the ultimate vindication. Because amongst horror movie villains, I think he's the only one in canon nightmare movies, which would not include the reboot,
right,
that was never played by anyone else.
No, totally. I mean, like, this is exactly like, yeah, actually, it's funny. You brought that up, and I was just, I forgot I had read about, like, this was a cost-cutting measure. It wasn't even, like, a personal thing against Robert Englund. It's like, I mean, like, the first movie, I think the budget was, like, $1.8 million. This one was $3 million. So, like, they're like, how are we gonna, you know, scrimp and save? But, like...
Well, no, they just honestly thought they're like, Freddy's what sells. They didn't realize that Freddy without Robert Englund is
right. Exactly. Like this is like the difference between him and Voorhees and Michael Myers is that this character is about the personality that comes with it. Like the Boogeyman's different than like the omnipresent like a Michael Myers. Like Michael Myers just shows up. Michael Myers is just huge and imposing. What's scary about Freddy is that he knows exactly what he's doing and he takes great pleasure in his work. Like, that's what I think is the important.
Well, I think this movie, too, you kind of hit on it. What this movie does well that people do not give it credit for is one of the things that's scary about Freddy in this movie is imagining that there is a version of that man inside of all of us, right?
Right.
That in Jesse, he finds kind of a kindred soul that might be ready to explode or on the verge of being pushed too far. You know, by his plaid short wearing dad or whatever. So the two scenes, obviously, him standing over his sister is the one that really haunts me. The gym scene, I think, there's a lot more going on subtextually that is horrifying, but not a great kill itself.
No.
Memorable more for the ass whipping, right? But the concept of him lashing out at a guy who's abusing him is really scary. The scene that sticks out to me is when he goes to Rod's room, right? Or not Rod, Grady's room, right?
Right. Is that the guy's name?
So he goes to this... Yeah, so this guy who says he's grounded for throwing his grandmother down a flight of stairs, which is, okay.
Right.
I'll just assume that's true. Weird. So he leaves the party where this girl is confessing his love for him, right? And they're about to bone until perhaps he nods off. Because this movie has a lot of interplay, too, where Freddy seemingly is interacting with the real world when there's no dreaming.
Yeah. Which
lets you know that perhaps this is Jesse starting to slip and want to embrace more of this character, right?
Right.
When he goes to Grady's room, though, is really fascinating and horrifying scene to me. As one, he has someone who's willing to watch him through the night and help him out, right? Who really wants to. Instead, he goes to the kid who bullied him and essentially starts, I need you. Right? Like, kind of lays into this. And again, that dialogue is a lot of what people talk about when they talk about the subtext. Why he runs to this guy, why in that moment. But what I like is he just says, watch me sleep. There's a part of me in this moment that questions, does Jesse want that kid to be his victim?
I mean, I think that's like, it's preying on I feel like in this, if you're going to use the subtext of what's happening, I feel like this is Freddy preying on Jesse's insecurities. I think Jesse goes to Grady because he knows Grady's been obviously like bullying him and stuff like that. So Grady is keeping.
But in the weird,
watch.
like I think they obviously are telling us that there is an infatuation there, that they actually have the sparks, right?
I mean, I guess
because there's no way you go to Grady because he'll be responsible and stay awake and watch me.
I mean, like there's obviously but I think ultimately
there's this weird predatory nature. But he also confesses that he kills Schneider,
right?
And Grady doesn't fucking react in terror.
Well, I mean, look, there's a lot going on there. There's a huge subtext. I mean, you could obviously make the case that subtextually this is about, you know, Jesse and Grady coming together. And then, but that Jesse's, again, like, let's see, subtextually you could say Freddy erupting from Jesse and killing Grady would be this sort of like your inability to control your emotions when you're alone with someone, when you actually feel like you're safe with somebody, I guess would be my dime store psychiatrist look at that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, again, I don't think the Freddy as the inner closeted.
No, that's not
gay,
something I would actually put that
It doesn't. No, I think what the movie does a good job of using that. I don't think it works perfectly because, again, it feels like something they discovered and steered more towards.
Right.
Because, again, I don't think the movie's trying to say that, homosexuality is this, murderous sin that Freddy's here to punish.
I think what
I think it is, though, is because him actually murdering Grady is a really interesting moment in the movie when, so he knows if he falls asleep, Freddy could come again. And again, this is a werewolf movie. So they have this amazing metamorphosis, which is just the best. When the glove starts coming out of the hand, the skin rips apart. Yeah. An image I'll never forget till the day I die is when Jesse's mouth is wide open and that like scream, eye? And the fucking eyeball is in there.
So cool.
Holy fuck. I saw that as a kid and it just like made my fucking head explode. Oh! Yeah. And then Freddy cutting himself from the own body and emerging is just fucking... Also, you're like, where was that hat inside the body? He reaches back like, where were you storing that hat? But it's just fucking amazing. Again, I was like, this is like one of the best werewolf transformations of all time, right? We just don't think of it as that. So it's this inner beast coming out, which I think gets to you. It's this overwhelming carnal nature, this and that. But then him getting killed, I think the metaphor kind of dies off there.
I mean, again, like,
but just imagine this, though. This is the other part of the scene is, so he stabs Grady into the door. We cut back to Jesse now wearing the glove covered in blood. You killed him. He's obviously super distraught and upset.
Right.
Freddy in the mirror mocking him, waving his finger like, oh, no. You don't get to be happy.
Right.
You don't get to unleash this, desire. I think think that's more what it is, a punishment
and then, like,
for forbidden desire.
Right. And I mean, again, like, this is where I can understand people's sort of dislike of this movie in this series. Like, I like all that stuff. Everything with Jesse, like, dealing with his inner demons of, like, I mean, just in general, like, I wouldn't even call it homoeroticism in general. Like, I would say this movie is much more about dealing with your inner carnal nature. Like, your inability to maintain, like, when you're a teenager, you can't fucking help your libido. It is what it is. Like, you fucking just, when you're a teenage boy in high school, you're a fucking boner factory. I don't know what to tell you. Like, it's just part of your life.
Well, also imagine if what is your turn on is considered bad.
Right, exactly.
And then you're afraid of, like, actual trouble or being preyed upon by a teacher.
Right.
That's what I mean. I think a lot of people use the gay imagery of this movie to somehow denigrate what it is.
Right.
But I think it adds a lot to the movie.
It does.
In a way,
it adds an extra layer.
Because what it does, too, is it adds on this concept of parents and adults not being trustworthy as protectors.
Right, totally.
Because he has this other secret that is more scary.
Right. And that's like the prevailing
there's even this
theme.
scene where, like, imagine this scene, right? Not only the scene when he's with Rod, you're like, Jesse's definitely, he's fucked. Like, he's going to jail forever.
Right. Oh, totally.
But the scene that is so interesting is after Schneider's found dead, they just find him wandering naked on a freeway in the rain, drop him off at home, and kind of give the, hey, put a short leash on that one.
You going to take care of this? Yeah, like that kind of thing.
They know, but they don't want to even say it out loud because it's an undesirable quality, right?
I mean...
And then his dad immediately is like, oh, it has to be drugs.
Right.
So even the adults become someone that he's leery of because of his, repressed secret.
And I would say, like, this sort of... This to me is where, like, this is where we break off, and, like, this is where, like, the third act kind of begins, and I would say this is almost sort of the end of what I think makes the movie so interesting, because once you get into the pool party stuff, and once we get into sort of all this area in general, like, that to me is where we just sort of get into, like, well, it's a horror movie, so let's just make things bloody and weird.
Right.
And, like, that's kind of where... And that's where Lisa comes back in. And again, like, Lisa to me is not like a super strong female protagonist, which I know that was like a big part of in the development of this movie. Like, Wes Craven was like, you got to have Lisa be a bigger deal. Like, to me, like, Jesse's journey is so fascinating and so interesting. It kind of gets muddied when we're thrown in with, like, Lisa. I mean, really, the subtitle of this movie shouldn't be Freddy's Revenge. It should be like Nightmare on Elm Street 2, like The Power of Love. Because that's really how this... That's essentially how this...
There is this constant, like, just because you want to hook up with another high school kid, you should not just accept them saying you're, like... He walks in after a murder.
Yeah.
And she's just like, sit down, let's talk. It's like, No, run away. If you even think he might have murdered, run the fuck away.
Yeah.
What I think the pool stuff is why this movie's maligned.
Sure, totally.
It is interesting in the fact of like the heat going up, all the horror. Like there's a lot of that. Right? Whoa, it's hot in here.
Yeah.
Woo, woo. Well, because that's what I mean. Like I feel like when they just add the generic horror movie scene, it doesn't work a lot in this movie, right? No. The pool stuff is not interesting because it's just Freddy in the real world. Help yourself, fucker.
Yeah.
And just slashing a guy. Like there's not a lot of, it's the Hitchcock. There's not fear in the explosion, the anticipation, right? There's no toying with. It's just kind of, I'm just out here hacking and slashing dipshits.
Like
the bird, just doesn't work.
The bird exploding, like there's just stuff.
Although I do love the bird when the hardcore dad is confronted with, "Wow, I couldn't defeat a bird."
Yeah,
and then he tries to be like Macho Dad the rest of the.
Like again,
what'd you do? Did you put a firecracker in her, boy?
Yeah, like the end of this movie is just so like. Again, I understand the malignment of the end of this movie because the end really takes away from the psychological aspects of what makes Freddy so great.
Right.
But look, you still get some fun stuff. Like I'll never forget those cats with the Freddy faces. Like that's
dude. The human face.
Sorry, the dogs. They're dogs. The dogs. Sorry.
And the were-rat. I love that foundry scene.
Yeah.
Right? Again,
that's so cool.
I think we get lost in the. Wait, Freddy with Jesse inside was defeated by a kiss from a girl? Not the strongest. Like maybe a little too when subtext becomes text, right?
Yeah.
Like we get it. But I thought that had great imagery. Again, I think if you take the pool party stuff out, the parakeet out, when you look at this movie as, again, it's a werewolf movie through the lens of a really troubled teen who sees himself as this small defenseless character who needs help, right? Can't fully be the person he wants to be. And if he does unveil that, he could be facing real consequences. And you run that parallel to this Nightmare on Elm Street story that we see, right? It's the same thing in werewolf movies. You wake up the next day, what have I done?
Right.
What have I done? No, that's not you. That's not you. Well, yes, it is. It is me, right? And that's what this is him repressing, no, it's not me. Well, it is. So there's a lot, I think if you keep it in this psychological, kind of horror where Jesse's repression and fear of the world, that as he faces it, leads him down this path where he can be co-opted by this fucking dream demon trying to murder in our world. I think that those chunks of the movie are fascinating and really well done.
Yeah, absolutely.
Again, him standing over his sister's bed is one of the more scary scenes in the entire series to me.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, like that's what I think is what makes this movie great. It's why I think it's unfairly maligned, and I get the ending is not so awesome, but like everything else overhead of this movie is so fascinating and so well done. Again, it does everything that a sequel needs to do, short of make a better ending than the first one. But like, regardless, the overall concept of Freddy's Revenge is sound. Like you're changing the rules in a sequel. You're progressing your story forward. You're making your bad guy the main character of your story. Yeah. It's valuable.
Well, yes. And again, if there is one critique of all the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, it's that they usually don't end very well. Right? So I think 4 and 5 end really cool with these big psychic battles, but a lot of them are just the real world. She turns his back on him. Oh, look in a mirror, right? There's not always great endings to these movies, but what it does well. And again, I think the other element of, kind of using the werewolf bones is inside as vile as Freddy Krueger is, right? And this dream demon, whatever he is, what if we're not giving him power in the way we think, right? What if through this kind of archetype of our darkest fantasies, he is working in tandem with us rather than he takes from us and then does bad.
Right.
What if we play too close with our darkest fantasies and how that manifests in the world? And again, I think you pair that with some of the more interesting elements of Jesse as a kid on the edge. I think that part of the movie is strong. I get it. The pool party sucks. It is funny when the parents wake up totally sex greasy.
Yeah.
That's funny. I like when the lights go off and the kids are like, the parents are fucking, we're fucking.
Right.
That's great. That stuff not great, but it's fun.
That's fun.
It's fun 80s stuff. But the big chunks of this movie, I think Jesse, and it's really sad because apparently they're coming out of the documentary called Scream Queen, I believe, where Mark Patton talks about how this went from being his big break to kind of ruining his life and career for a long time.
So sad.
Because a lot of the gay overtones, I would say, in this movie, not subtext, overtones.
Right.
But, to me, I look back on this one really fondly. I think it has some of the more interesting kind of thought experiments in the series. I like that it veers a different way. I like the idea of, again, playing with, like, Freddy is not just something attacking us, but maybe being lured to be a little Freddy ourselves. I think that's a really fun, and again, you got 8 other movies that do the I'll stab you in a dream. Yeah. Why not try something a little
fresh.
Different? You know what I mean?
Totally.
That's it, guys, for Nightmare on Elm Street 2. We hope that you wake up all hot and bothered after listening to this pod. Super sweaty and wet. Yeah, ooh, is it hot here? I got the vapors. Me and Jesse have the vapors. Guys, we will continue with Dream Warriors, perhaps the pinnacle of Nightmare. All the Nightmare movies this month, all the Friday the 13th movies, culminating in our battle between Freddy versus Jason. Also some good stuff in the theaters. If you guys like the show, and we appreciate you for listening, please take a second to leave us a rating and review wherever you find the show, especially iTunes. Share us on your socials so we can bring more Alchemists into this fun journey.
Please.
And that's it, guys. We'll be back with more horror madness for the film Alchemist. I'm Josh Griffin.
I'm Alex Dandino.